I was trying to think, talk about maths, and my brain was doing that kind of, what do I actually think about maths? I mean, obviously I sit in a stats department. I'm sure many, many people across Oxford Maths would tell you that I'm not really a mathematician. And I thought, my first thought is, well, maths is hard. It's true, but it's also fascinating. It's sort of exciting. Sometimes it's even beautiful. But then I thought what I really wanted to say was maths is vital. Everything we come up against, everything we think about, every talk you've heard today has expressed it so clearly, the different areas, the underpinning, the importance, the places it goes and what it gives to us. So throughout my talk, what I want you to remember is what I'm trying to remind us of is maths is vital, but we have to be able to say that proudly and loudly, and we have to be able to explain it to a world that sometimes, as we've heard in lots of the other talks, kind of goes, maths, and takes a step back. And instead, when they hear it, they should be taking a step forwards. It should be the exciting words that we hear. Now, before I delve into all of that, I'm going to do a quick detour because it was mentioned this morning, or I guess this afternoon, by the Secretary of State, the announcement of the Centres for Doctoral Training. And I thought it would be helpful just to kind of frame exactly what that is at this point in time. So we have just invested about sort of $500 million of public money, partnered by about $500 million of private money into 65 centres for doctoral training across the country. This will train about 4,500 students, which is a lot of students. It involves about 48 different universities. I think the important things that this audience will care about is 5 of those CDTs are directly in mathematics, so they are maths and mathematical sciences CDTs. And I did try and do a massive scan down the rest of the list, and Neil, who's with me here as well, and Alison, we were looking at them all trying to say, how many others are there? And then we gave up. So I'm going to go for many, because it depends how you would exactly state that. But there are lots and lots in what are, if you like, the really kind of close areas or others which will train mathematicians. The whole list is up, and you can have a look at it and talk to me more about it after this. But obviously, the CDTs are not the only things that the EPSRC supports in this area. We have lots of funding supporting across a kind of broad range of different activities and things going on. Just highlighted a few things here. A really important part of what we want to be able to do is support new ideas, talent, and early careers, really investing in investigator-led research. This has come up a few times, and I'll come back to this. We have to ensure that we have a research base which is broad and wide and is doing things that, I'll be honest, frankly, I don't know if they're important today, but I do know that they're important. And those are 2 very different statements, and we should be completely comfortable with that and also be able to articulate why that is important. Then thinking about how we keep developing and sustaining new partnerships. I mean, what I've just said about the CDTs kind of tells you how much we have to try and link together the sectors that are working. So we have to link academia with industry and also with policy and with government. It's really important, and this has come up, I've heard in a few of the other talks, about this idea of building a more diverse community. So one of the things we're working on is we're working with the RSS and Turing to try and understand our applicant pool and try and understand potential bias in reviewers' reports. These things are really important in terms of getting the best research funded. And then convening across disciplines. It's something that whether I heard sort of both tensions in the talk so far. There's this tension of, well, you should do maths for maths' sake. Yeah, you should. But you should also do maths for lots of other sakes as well. And both of those are good and cool. And we should never kind of see them as competitions. And so one of the things that I'm very keen on is ensuring that we embed mathematics across all of the UKRI strategic themes and the other things it does. So back to that thing about vital. And trying to think of a way of describing that. I guess I'm going to use 3 examples, and I feel a bit like I'm preaching to the converted here. But partly I'm preaching to the converted because we need to convert the rest of the world to our way of thinking as well. So fundamental research really does drive discovery, but it also drives the economy and it drives innovation. If we think about the conversations that we were having about just the policy stuff just a few moments ago, we need these deep analytical thinkers. We need it throughout industry and government because that's how we will make a difference. So it's once again, there is a reason to do maths for maths' sake, but there's definitely a reason to do maths for all sorts of others as well. I'm now going to try and do 3 very short examples for each of those, more as a kind of makes me feel happy to talk about them. So the first one is about rough path theory. I am presuming that most of this audience know more about this than I do, particularly as I was kind of given several crib sheets and read quite a lot, so I could say all of these words in a sensible order. But it was developed back in the 1990s by Terry Lyons, and it's really to understand how irregular signals interact with nonlinear systems. And then you can look through the next bullet points, and those are the kind of bullet points where if I start talking about them to people outside the mathematical sciences, they go, oh, that's nice, you've been talking to yourselves again, and it sounds very important. And it is important. But what also makes this story exciting is you get to the end of this, and then you go, rough path theory is now being applied in machine learning to lots of things across weather modeling, cybersecurity, finance, healthcare decision making. Now, there are many, many things happening in mathematical sciences today where I can't tell that story yet, but it will be the case. And it's these kinds of stories that make it easier for us to be able to explain why this is important. It is not the reason we do everything, but it has to be part of our explanation for how and why we do it. The case for deep analytical thinkers, I think, it is so obvious because everyone else has already spoken about it. And it's probably one of the biggest impacts the mathematical sciences have, training many, many people very broadly and thinking less about, that kind of really in-depth specialist work, but just people who can answer the kinds of questions that were asked in all of the previous panels and being able to communicate that research really well. I've deliberately here picked the government's sort of critical technologies because it's a nice way to speak to them as well about why this is important. But thinking about, every single one of those, it is important that there is both underpinning theory from mathematics participating within them and driving forward the changes that they will do. So there's no doubt of the importance of what's going on. And then the idea of being embedded. It is once again, I think, obvious, but you can read the ones on here. My personal favourite is the one about Spotify and audio fingerprinting. So those of you, Shazam. Basically, the idea is, I want to be able to recognise a piece of music. How can I do that really well, despite the fact that I'm in a club and there's loads of people screaming in the background? It feels like most of you haven't experienced that recently, but there are still people who do, and it is really important. But that is a maths problem. And it's a really nice maths problem because it's actually quite a hard one too. So looking ahead, I've picked just 3 things here in the looking ahead. There is so much I'm looking ahead to. As was mentioned, I only started in this role in January, so I'm just beginning to get to grips with kind of the breadth and the depth and all the different things that are happening. But things that are really exciting for me in this area is the new National Academy for the Mathematical Sciences. I think that's an incredible opportunity. You've heard a little bit about it already. I think we will hear more as we go forwards. We have going underway inside EPSRC a piece of work to really better understand the socio-economic impacts of the mathematical science research. And this is really important, and it kind of leads on to the last bit. We have to make the strongest possible case for future funding. We are already in conversations across government. You heard the concept of the comprehensive spending review being mentioned. That is coming. And the case cannot be we sit back and go, well, it's obvious, isn't it? The case has to be, this is important. We care, you care, we want to change the world, you want to change the world. This is one of the most important ways of doing this, and we want to be part of that. So I guess to finish, I'm just going to go back to where I started. It is obvious, I suspect, to everyone in this room that maths is vital. It underpins so much of what we want to achieve and what we want to do, be that economically, be that in thought, be that in policy. But it is our role not just to be proud of that, be a little bit proud, it's kind of cool. And it's also kind of cool that we're lucky in this country, we have a really strong research base to do this from. This is an outstanding place to do these subjects. But we have to also be the advocates for that. We have to be the people who stand up and say, this is important, this is why it's important, and we want to help make it even better. Thank you very much. Sit next to you.
You also sat next to me. I'm appreciating it. So we've got 10 minutes for questions there. I wanted to pick up on kind of two things that you mentioned. One is the idea of embedding maths across the UKRI strategic themes. I'm a little bit involved with the organisation. I sit on the council at Research England, and I think it's definitely a lens that I don't know that we get to explore often enough, actually, the importance of maths. But then that links to this idea of the socio-economic impact. Right, and why can't us spending time in nightclubs be part of that business case that we're building for more funding? So questions for Professor Charlotte from across the audience. Pop your hands up and we'll get a microphone to you. So question just there on the right-hand side. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Pinch, Heilbronn Institute. Could you say how you see EPSR, or the role EPSRC has to play in sort of bringing problems from application domains into the mathematics research world, as well as passing solutions to problems that haven't been asked yet, or whose owners don't yet know that they have that problem?
So I think that partly relates to kind of what we're talking about there with the UKRI strategic themes, and also the kind of general business of doing kind of cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary research. It is a two-way conversation always. I don't think we should sit back and go, right, come on, rest of the world, come and ask me. Yep, I, mathematician. What we have to do is go both ways. And so some of this is to create the spaces and opportunities where you have directed calls of some type, where you're directly asking the question in some areas. Some of it is you're fitting up against what are the UK strategic priorities. So thinking about, if you think about something like climate change, to ensure that we're engaging the mathematical sciences community and thinking about how they are part of the answer to those questions as well. And some of it is also a direct reach out, the expectation that if you have exciting ideas, making them understandable enough that people can pick them up from other domains.
Fantastic. Our next question. Oh, you've stumped them. Oh, okay, there's one here.
Thanks for the talk, by the way. It was fantastic. So I'm a working academic mathematician, and I want EPSRC to be able to make the case for more money for mathematics. What can I do, and what can the wider mathematical sciences community do to help you with that?
So there are two sides to making a case. And the side, and both of these we always need help with. One is trying to collect the data properly. It's amazingly difficult to actually work out the data of, for example, persuading universities to tell us exactly how many PhD students they actually have in mathematics. So persuading your universities to tell us that would be a good starting point. But the other part of this is that stories are really important. What I need are the numbers so I can say, this is important, I can show how it drives economic growth, I can show how it has impact, I can show the long-term trajectories, so it is worth funding fundamental stuff because it has impact. But the stories are what help people to see that. And we need the stories from you. I mean, I do research, but my stories are not that great. I need stories from people who can show amazing research and how it translates. And some of those are very long-term. And so we need people to help us to articulate those. And also, we need you to advocate for yourselves in this sense. And that's what I mean about standing up about this, is not to go, maths should have all the money, but to go, maths is important, mathematical sciences need to be taken seriously, and we need to talk about that openly and never be ashamed of saying it out loud.
I think we're coming back to that kind of communication in that storytelling. I wanted to ask a question that relates to the kind of analysis that you were trying to do of the institutions in the CDTs and those that were maths, a little bit maths, and we're not quite sure about how much maths. And I wanted to know, when we look at interdisciplinary collaboration, what role does that play in advancing mathematical sciences, right? How much should we be trying to foster those cross-disciplinary interactions across the research space? And is that something that EPSRC might be tapping into a little bit, maybe in the longer term rather than now?
I think interdisciplinary work has always had enormous power, and I'll admit my own bias here. That's exactly where I sit, so that's why people might not call me a mathematician. I sit between two areas. It is well known that one of the ways that you can generate really brand new and brilliant ideas is you do them kind of because you're forced to, because you're trying to answer a real question that's come from another discipline in some way. And sometimes we pretend that brilliance only comes from sitting there thinking very carefully on our own. And sometimes it does that too. So interdisciplinary research can really power growth in areas, and it can, really change the way we do, if you like, the underpinning subject as well. And I think there's enormous opportunity to increase the amount of that. There always is. I think that there is something that we should grasp as a mathematical sciences community around interdisciplinarity as well. Because one of the reasons to talk about the UKRI strategic themes is embedding mathematical sciences into them more firmly and making that part of what they see as important in the solutions means that we expand the community of people who understand why it's important, but also expand the community of practitioners, if you like, people who are actually doing this.
And folks that feel that they have something to contribute, right, as a mathematician, non-mathematician, or otherwise. If there's not any more... Oh, there's a question. Kathy's got a question. I have a long list, but I need to be conscious of my privilege. I have the microphone, so I should really share it. Awesome. Kathy.
Thanks, Charlotte. Thinking about knowledge exchange in mathematics, how do you think we're doing as a community in sharing knowledge more broadly with industry and innovation, and what more could we do?
I think we have some kind of amazing examples where we're trying to do it really well. So we have like the Knowledge Exchange Network and things that are being built up to make that happen. But I guess my answer to this is it's almost the same in every discipline. It's like we're always trying to do it, but it is always a little bit challenging because it's the language barrier, it's the timeline differences about what people care about, and it's the effort involved in making that step. So I think that it's like a continuous evolution of finding different mechanisms, because I can point at fantastic examples on the ground of where this is happening, and I can point at areas where you can see real success. But I will still, when I go into various meetings, get banged over the head by people telling me that, academics don't know how to talk to industry, they've cut themselves off from it, they have no idea what's going on. And that's not a true statement, but I can also point at examples where that's happened. So I think it's continuously asking the question about what mechanisms can we improve, continuously thinking about it, because of course industry is changing a lot at the moment as well. Their interest in subjects has changed dramatically from 5 years ago. There's a whole load of things that I thought were really exciting, they clearly didn't, and now they think are exciting. And I think being able to understand that change as well is something the Research Council can help with and give space and time for people to be able to do that too.
Fantastic. I think that brings us to the end of the time that we have. I feel challenged on this nightclub thing. Okay. I've got to say, I'm still mulling on it. But if you'd like to join me in thanking Professor Charlotte Deane for sharing with us.